What are the greatest supply chain innovations in history? Hi, this is Dan Gilmore from Supply Chain Digest and the Supply Chain Television Channel. Very pleased to be here with a video version of our top 10 supply chain innovations of all time. In determining our list of the top 10 supply chain innovations of all time, we had two criteria. The innovation had to be clearly developed by a single set of companies or individuals, and the innovation had to have had a deep and lasting impact on supply chain practice. That left out a lot of candidates, especially in the technology areas, where innovations often came from a number of sources in an evolutionary kind of way, examples being things like supply chain network optimization or RFID. So with that intro, in reverse order, here is the Supply Chain Digest Top 10 Supply Chain Innovations. Number 10 on our list is Taylorism. In the late 1800s, the great Frederick Taylor takes the first really scientific approach to manufacturing. First, in the early 1880s, he invents the concepts of using time studies on the factory floor, and based on that work, the notion of standard times for getting specific tasks done. Later, Taylor develops the concept of incentive and piece rate pay systems, and Taylor's ideas were simply seminal and often controversial, and they dramatically influenced the practice of manufacturing over the next few decades, and really even to this very day. Number 9, 3M's Transportation Load Control Center. Yes, 3M was the first company to do it, with a man named Roy Majewski who was leading the charge. In about 1982, 3M, like every other company, had to leave transportation decisions to each plant and distribution center. Majewski came up with the idea to centralize transportation planning to look for network synergies. He took a mainframe software application being used by Schneider National, one of 3M's major carriers, and modified it to be workable from a shipper perspective. Ship sites called in planned shipments, carriers and routings were phoned back. The Load Control Center is now, of course, standard practice in the transportation industry today. Number 8, Distribution Requirements Planning, or DRP. In the late 1970s, Andre Martin ran operations for Abbott Labs Canada and found himself caught between manufacturing and distribution managers who could never seem to quite get the inventory questions right and always were pointing fingers at each other. Realizing that what was needed was a sort of manufacturing resources planning for inventory distribution, Martin led a successful effort to build the first computerized DRP system, which in turn led to a groundbreaking book that really invented the software category of DRP, as several technology firms built products based on these ideas. This was in many ways the start of today's supply chain planning software industry, and hence very much deserves to be on our list. Number 7, the Federal Express Package Tracking System. After really reinventing the category of express parcel shipments, FedEx went a step further in the mid-1980s with its development of a new computerized tracking system that provided near real-time information about package delivery. FedEx began outfitting their drivers with small handheld computers for scanning pickups and deliveries, and when the reader was placed into a communications cradle back inside the truck, a shipment status was available end-to-end. The FedEx system really drove the idea that information was about as important as the package itself, and was really the foundation of our current supply chain visibility systems and concepts. Number 6, the Universal Product Code, or UPC. This one came close to violating our criteria for clear heritage, as the problem of automatic identification for consumer products had been worked on for some time. But in the early 1970s, a company called Logicon wrote a standard for something very close to what became known as the Universal Product Code, or UPC, to identify via a barcode a specific SKU, an effort that was finalized just a short time later by George Laurer of IBM. The first implementation of the UPC was actually in 1974 at a Marsh's supermarket in Troy, Ohio, north of Dayton. The invention really was a catalyst for the entire auto ID movement, forever changing supply chain practice and information flow. Okay, that's number 10 through 6. Before we get going for the top 5 innovations of all time, let's just hear a quick word from our sponsor.
Supply chain success today requires the best in enabling technology. Deep, innovative functionality, maximum flexibility, web-native architecture, proven customer success, and ROI. There's only one solution that meets all of these requirements and more: Softeon. That's why supply chain and logistics leaders such as Sears, Sony, Seva Logistics, DB Schenker, Dietz & Watson, Time Incorporated, and more rely on Softeon. Warehouse management, transportation management, order management, inventory management, labor management, route accounting, and more. Softeon delivers.
Okay, this is Dan. I'm back. Number 5 on our list is the Ford Motor Company assembly line. Henry Ford actually developed the idea for the assembly line approach from some of the flow-type systems he'd seen in meatpacking operations in the Midwest, Cincinnati and Chicago. But it was Ford's adoption of the production approach using a continuously moving line for Model Ts in 1913 that revolutionized not only the automobile assembly process, but took the practice of manufacturing to new levels in many other sectors as well. Total time of assembly for a single car using the production line process fell from 12.5 labor hours to just 93 labor minutes. Incredible. Ultimately making the cars affordable for the masses, and thus he not only changed supply chain, but really society as well. Number 4 on our list of supply chain innovations, economic order quantity, or EOQ. Economic order quantity, as many know, is a mathematical approach for determining the financially optimal amount of product to order from suppliers. It's based on inventory holding costs and ordering costs. The original concept is generally credited to a man named Ford Whitman Harris, a Westinghouse engineer. Here an article in about 1913, but it wasn't really until a much later article on the same subject, building on that, in the Harvard Business Review in 1934 by a man named R.H. Wilson, that the tool of EOQ really went mainstream into the business community. Of course, the formulas are still taught today everywhere in universities and other places, and are the basis for much supply chain decision making more than 70 years after EOQ was first developed. Okay, we're down to the final 3 supply chain innovations of all time. At the number 3 position is the ocean shipping container. And it's hard to imagine today, but until the mid-1950s, there was really no standard way to ship products on ocean carriers. And most goods were shipped on whatever container or platform the producer company deemed best. The result, of course, was terribly inefficient handling on both sides of the equation, poor space utilization on the cargo ships, high logistics costs for everybody. And Malcolm McLean, the legendary logistics entrepreneur and visionary, who invented the standard steel shipping container, first implemented in 1956 at the Port of New Jersey. I'm sure someone would have thought of the idea eventually, but it was McLean's invention that started the really explosion in global trade and was subject of a book not that long ago about the box that changed the world. Number 2, Procter & Gamble's continuous replenishment program. Until 1987 or so, order patterns in the consumer goods to retail supply chain were almost totally dependent on whatever the manufacturer or salesperson and the retail buyer decided between them. That's until Procter & Gamble bought a mainframe application from IBM for continuous replenishment, which had been deployed a handful of times in other markets, but then Procter & Gamble rewrote it for the consumer goods to retail industry. And as a result, dramatically changed that entire value chain by now driving orders based on DC withdrawals, sales data, and other factors. P&G had some success with the program at Schnucks Markets in St. Louis and then Kmart, but it was a legendary 1988 meeting between P&G's CEO and Sam Walton of Walmart that changed supply chain history, as a deep, continuous replenishment-based business strategy helped propel Walmart to retail dominance and provided the foundation for efficient consumer response, category management, continuous planning, forecasting, and replenishment, and a whole lot more in the consumer goods to retail value chain. And finally, drumroll please, the top supply chain innovation of all time. At number 1 in the top supply chain innovation of all time is the Toyota production system. When James Womack and several co-authors wrote The Machine That Changed the World in 1990, it was of course not an actual Toyota car that had such an impact, but rather the Toyota production system itself that was the foundation of the company's dramatic success across the globe. Pioneered by Toyota's Taiichi Ono and a few of his colleagues, TPS is not only the foundation for today's lean manufacturing and supply chain practices, but the concepts have penetrated virtually every area of business. TPS truly did change the world. So that's our look at the top supply chain innovations of all time. We certainly hope you enjoyed it.